Go.
The truth behind storytelling. In the small town of Marabatío, Mexico, is a place called Las Colemnas. There were 3 girls who wanted to go out to a party in a nearby rancho. They had all asked permission to go to this event, and all of their parents said no. These girls really wanted to go, so they disobeyed their parents and decided to go anyways. On their way to the party, they ran into a man dressed all in black, riding a horse. He was wearing a big mariachi hat and was dressed in a long black coat with boots covered in mud. They didn't know this man, but in the pueblo it was said that this man was just El Diablo disguised as a serious man. He stopped the girls as they were walking along the riverside and warned them not to go to the party because it was too dark for 3 young girls to be out so late and alone. The girls thought nothing of it, so they gave him a shrug, and with their mind set, they headed for the party. When the party was over, they were walking back home along the same trail, which was the only way back to Las Colemnas. In the morning, their parents noticed they weren't home, so they decided to search for them. The girls were nowhere to be found. Eventually, an old lady walking on the same path spotted them hung by long, fat, spiky vines along the river. This is one of the many folklore my grandparents shared with my dad. My dad shares many stories with me. However, this one in particular caught my attention more than the rest. The moral of the story is to never disobey. I have heard this story at least 10 times. As I grow up, I notice that the more I listen to the tale, the more I understand it. When my parents tell me these stories, I realize that they always have 3 key elements, which are: they always contain a valuable lesson, they express our culture, and give us an idea on how long the cuento has been passed down. First, the stories I've been told have always had a meaningful lesson for which I am expected to learn from. The story of the disobedient girls taught me that I shouldn't disobey my parents. A dicho my dad would always tell me is, el que obedece no se equivoca, which means those who obey won't get any trouble. I have carried this saying with me wherever I go, especially when I'm with other people, because this story dramatically demonstrates the consequences of disobedience. Secondly, the stories my parents have told me always express the culture they once lived in. My dad once told me that in the pueblo where he grew up, the people dressed like indios. I picture the women in their rebozos, the long white dresses with fluorescent colors, with their homemade huaraches and those trenzas around their head with a flower. The guys, I imagine like the story of Juan Diego, with his clothes made of mantel-type fabric. My dad tells me about how they dress so I don't forget that beautiful part of my culture. My dad would describe these people with such a passion that led me to realize that the people mean so much to him because they have stayed true to their culture. As he tells me these stories, I picture him in my position, listening to the intriguing stories being told by my great-grandparents. I imagine my great-grandparents telling my dad the story with a sparkle in their eye, and my dad listening with his eyes wide open, waiting to hear the end. Wine improves with age. The older it gets, the better I like it. This quote also applies with the stories, because the older the story is, the richer it becomes. The story about the 3 girls have been passed down in our family for many generations. The story is actually one of my favorites because I can relate to it. In a sense, I feel the presence of the people who told this story to my father, even though I didn't have the honor of meeting my great-grandparents. I feel emotionally attached to my ancestors when these stories are being told, because as time goes on, these stories stay true to their meaning. Storytelling was once the only form of entertainment. The stories parents pass down are special because they teach us a valuable lesson. In each story, culture is being expressed, and the stories will be shared throughout generations. We learn from these stories because they are told as if the events actually happened, requiring us to live by the morals shared. Without these stories, we will slowly and gradually forget how our culture was in the past. These stories are a sign of great society because people have lived by these cuentos. I keep these tales with me as a reminder of what goes on in Mexico, the place I was born, and how important these stories are to our culture. That's why they're so great. Even though our parents' stories might be a little corny, they always come with the blessing of knowing our fun, loving, and fundamental Latino heritage.